You're listening to the Bears Barroom Radio Network, and the following program is suitable for all audiences.
Paxton for three! Yeah! Yeah!
In 1993, when Chicago Bulls guard John Paxson sunk the series-winning shot in Game 6 of the NBA Finals, Mark Schanowski was there reporting. In 1988, when Michael Jordan beat Dominique Wilkins in what is considered the greatest, most controversial slam dunk duel of all time, David Schuster was there reporting.
What kind of expectations do you set for yourself individually going into year 3?
In 2010, when Derrick Rose said,
"Why can't I be the MVP of the league? Why can't I be the best player in the league? I don't see why. Why can't I do that?"
It was Mark Schanowski who asked the question.
It is my distinct honor to present the 2010-2011 NBA Most Valuable Player Award to Derrick Rose of the Chicago Bulls.
In 2011, when Rose accepted the Most Valuable Player award to become the youngest MVP in the history of the league, David Schuster was there reporting. Schanowski, Schuster, two of Chicago's most accomplished NBA reporters. This is Sharpshooters.
Welcome into the latest podcast of Sharpshooters. I'm David Schuster, and he is the multi-talented Mark Schanowski. And Mark,
that's pretty good.
Well, you are. I mean, I bow down to you.
You haven't seen me play golf.
Well, you haven't seen me play golf. You think I'm weird here? You should see me on the golf course. Anyway, Mark, my basketball juice is really starting to flow because we're down to the nitty-gritty of the NBA season. And also on this podcast, we should tell everybody that we have the always glib Joe Cowley. And you're never cheated when Joe has a chance to talk some basketball, and we'll look forward to talking to him.
Yeah, and he always has an opinion. I'm sure he'll offer a couple of strong ones along the way.
Never lacking in that department. But we are down to the nitty-gritty, as mentioned, in the bubble, and the basketball continues to be very good. We're recording this on Tuesday early in the afternoon. There's a couple of big games tonight. We'll start in the West because there's Game 7 between Denver and the LA Clippers. I'll admit, I'm surprised that it's reached the 7th game, but all the credit to the Nuggets and their coaching staff and their players because they have a chance to do something that's never been done before. That's rally from a 3-1 deficit to win a series twice in the postseason.
Yeah, do it once, and it's a shocker. To do it a second time would be unbelievable. They came back against a Jazz team that was, had its flaws. So you could see, I thought Denver was the better team in that series. So maybe it's just a case of them getting more comfortable in the playoff situation. And of course, Jamal Murray had those lights out performances with a couple of 50-point games down the stretch. So that one made some sense on a basketball level. But you look at the Clippers. And the Clippers, of course, are my pick to win the title, and they ran out to a 3-1 lead, and you thought, well, they'll just grind him out in Game 5 and it'll be over. But, they let him win that game. Then they had a 19-point lead in Game 6, the Clippers did, and blew that. So now there's a ton of pressure on that organization. The Clippers have never been to the Western Conference Finals. They look like a lock to get there this year. And when you talk about pressure, it's really going to be interesting to see if guys like Paul George and Lou Williams and some of the guys who have never been there before are going to be able to handle it. We know that Kawhi Leonard will have a good game. You wonder about some of the other guys that the Clippers are going to look to for scoring.
Doc Rivers always going to be one of my favorite people, both basketball, on the court, off the court, and just in life in general. I just love this guy. And he was very critical of his team after the last couple of games. And yes, rightfully so. Yeah, in Game 6, they were outscored by 29 points in the second half.
They ended up losing by 13 in a game they led by 19. You don't see those types of turnarounds in playoff games.
I still think it's going to be the Lakers ultimately. I still think it'll be a battle of Los Angeles. I think the Clippers, again, we could be wrong. And if I'm wrong, we'll burn this tape like I always say. But because the game is later tonight as we record this in the afternoon. But I still think it'll be a battle of Los Angeles. And I just like the Lakers. I think they're playing better, obviously, than the Clippers at this stage of the season. And I still like when you have the two of the best 5 players on the planet, that's tough to beat.
Well, back when they made the trade for Anthony Davis, I thought that immediately thrust them into the favorites role. And they had some issues as the league went to the restart. Avery Bradley, who I thought was an important piece for them as a good two-way guard, he decided not to participate. Rondo broke his thumb, and you thought, well, do they have enough ball handling? Do they have enough depth in the backcourt to handle pressure as the series go along? But lo and behold, playoff Rondo is back. He had a couple of fantastic games in that series against Houston. I think that series was really kind of cut out for his talents. He could take advantage of the matchups and really kind of run the offense and do things that he likes to do. I think it might be a little bit tougher in the next round if they get the Clippers, but give credit to Rondo. He's had a lot of injuries in the back end of his career. Of course, everyone knows as Bulls fans about the injury in the playoffs when they had the 2-0 lead against Boston. But again, it's a hand injury. He broke his thumb and he came back faster than expected. He's playing at a high level. And I think the big question about the Lakers was who else was going to step forward? Was it going to be Kyle Kuzma as that third scorer? Was Danny Green going to make big shots like he did during his San Antonio days? But surprisingly, it's been Rondo playing that third wheel role, and he's doing a really good job with him playing the way he is. I think right now the Lakers would be the favorite in the series.
Dwight Howard did not have to play too much in that previous series against Houston because, let's face it, Houston does, and we're going to talk about Houston also here in just a second, and Mike D'Antoni, but Houston played small, so there was no reason for Howard to come off the bench. But if they go against Denver or the Clippers, I think you'll see more of him off the bench in that next series in the Western Conference Final Series. As far as the East, it's Miami and Boston. It's the numbers 3 and 5 seeds. It's the first time in years, Mark, where it's not the top 2 seeds in the Eastern Conference Finals. And the one common denominator, and there's actually a lot of common denominators about these two teams, they're both extremely well coached.
Yeah, no question about it. I think that Boston, able to survive that series against Nick Nurse and the Raptors. Nick Nurse got a contract extension, which was very well deserved as Coach of the Year. But Brad Stevens did a good job without Gordon Hayward and kind of a thin bench to be able to make sure that he had good personnel on the court for the entire game. And that's one of the real challenges when you get to the playoffs is how deep do you go in your rotations? Do you trust some of your guys, your 9, 10, 11 guys on the bench, or do you just go with your top 8? And I thought he did a good job of making sure that he had a competitive roster out there. And another guy who's underrated, who's played really well, is Daniel Tice, the center from Europe, who really doesn't get much recognition. I thought he played extremely well in that series. He got some key offensive rebounds, which gave them extra possessions. And we know that Jason Tatum has emerged as an all-star player this year. And obviously, when you look back at that draft, he should have been the first guy taken.
Hayward will likely be back at some juncture in this series, could even be as early as tonight. I mean, they've been pretty secretive on his status, but I anticipate that, he's been working out. I anticipate he'll be back at some juncture in this series. I'm going to defer to you on picking a winner in this series because I was completely wrong on Miami and Milwaukee, and I defer to you. You were absolutely 100% correct on that one. I can't decide who I like better in this series, Boston or Miami.
Yeah, you look at this one on paper, and it really looks like a 7-game series. There's really not much to differentiate these two teams. I think the one advantage that Boston has as opposed to Milwaukee is they're more athletic on the perimeter. I think they can do a better job closing out on the three-point shots. I don't think you're going to see Tyler Hero and Duncan Robinson hurt the Celtics as much as they hurt Milwaukee, because Milwaukee's philosophy was to pack the paint and concede some of those three-point shots, which is just really playing into the hands of the Heat. They're going to have a tough time matching up with Jimmy Butler. They have Jaylen Brown, who probably will be given that assignment, who's a good athlete, a good defensive player. But Jimmy has a way of getting under the skin of the opposition, and that's going to be a tremendous matchup to watch. I'm sure Tatum will get some shots at him. I think they'll try to avoid Gordon Hayward guarding him if he's playing in that series. It'll be interesting to see if Jimmy, getting the chance to showcase himself in the Eastern Conference Finals, will even raise his game another level.
Well, I'm going to bet that when we talk to Joe Cowley, he might have some opinions on Jimmy.
He's always been a big Jimmy fan.
Oh, always has been. All right, we talked about Milwaukee on a couple of occasions already here. Obviously, one of the other stories that's big in the NBA right now, and Giannis, before he went on his vacation, can you go on vacation during pandemics? I can't go anywhere.
Hey, when you have hundreds of millions of dollars, you can do anything you want.
You can go buy your own island. I'm going there. Anyway, Giannis apparently met with Bucks ownership earlier before going on his quote-unquote vacation, and he elicited a promise that they will go, if necessary, and it will be necessary, to go into the luxury tax, because let's face it, if he's going to be on that roster, they're going to have to go into the luxury tax area, to support him. But I guess, he elicited a promise that they will build more around him and get some more talent. And it sure looks like from those comments from him that he wants to stay in Milwaukee, your hometown, by the way. And if that's the case, he's going to get between $220 and $250 million over 5 years. What do you think about the whole thing?
Well, Bucks Cohen or Mark Lazary with the textbook move for the ownership. Get the guy out to lunch and see if you can schmooze him a little bit. But it's going to take a lot more than that to get Giannis' signature on a long-term deal. He's going to want to see what they can do in terms of upgrading the roster. And one of the first names mentioned is on the way out is the guy that I can't stand, Eric Bledsoe. The guy is just so erratic, so inconsistent, disappears in playoff games, and he was terrible again in this postseason, just making bad decisions with the ball, missing free throws, just a horrible performance. And one name we've seen from several very well, highly respected basketball writers is the name Chris Paul, because with Billy Donovan leaving Oklahoma City, that triggers that they're likely to go full rebuild, because Sam Presti has that treasure trove of first-round draft picks. He got in the Paul George and Harden trades, and they've got guys whose contracts are going to be expiring soon. Danilo Gallinari is a free agent this year. Steven Adams, I believe, has one more year on his deal, as does Chris Paul. Or Chris Paul has 1 year and an option. So that might be a move that Milwaukee could make, is to bring Chris Paul in to go with Giannis and give them some stability in tight games, and a guy who can make big shots and won't shy away when the games are so important.
Well, I'm sure Chris Paul would like to play in a major market, especially after being in Oklahoma City. And let's face it, Milwaukee's not a major market. However, to play alongside maybe the best player in basketball right now in Giannis, that's beyond tempting. So I could see that happening. Now, doesn't Oklahoma City, if they were to lose Chris Paul, don't they have a bushel full of first-round picks over the next 5 to 8 years?
Yeah, they got all those in the trades they made last offseason when they made the Paul George trade to the Clippers, and of course the Westbrook Harden trade, or Westbrook Paul trade, also brought a lot of draft picks back to Oklahoma City. So they're sitting on 5 or 6 draft picks in the next first rounders in the next couple of years, and they can totally reshape that franchise if that's the direction Sam Presti wants to go. And if Milwaukee could make a deal for Chris Paul, I think that would help them, A, to get Giannis to commit, and B, to improve their chances in the East.
All right, we're going to talk plenty about the Bulls. We'll do that after we talk to Joe Cowley. But there are some other names in the news in the NBA. Just want to touch upon them. We talked about Houston, Mike D'Antoni, right at the end of the series after they lost to the Lakers. It was a parting of the ways amicably between himself and Rockets ownership. It'll be interesting to see who Houston brings in as their next head coach. But it's also as interesting to see where D'Antoni ends up going. There's a lot of rumors already, and there's all of a sudden a lot of big name coaches that have been either let go or on their own decided to leave certain teams that are now on the open market. So, Mike D'Antoni, his name is coming up in Philadelphia. I can't see that because that roster just isn't a Mike D'Antoni kind of roster. He loves, shooters. Philadelphia no longer has shooters, and Ben Simmons, I think, would drive him crazy. So where do you think Mike D'Antoni ends up? I could see him being in New Orleans as a potential.
Yeah, it's just a question of, Mike's in his early 70s now, isn't he?
But he still wants to do it.
Yeah, I'm not sure what exactly his mindset is. Obviously, he's not at that age in the situation where he's going to take a year off and think about it. If he's going to keep going, he's going to want to do it. Indiana has an opening. They're not really strong on outside shooting either, and they're probably a middling team in the Eastern Conference. You would think that if he would try to latch on to somewhere, he'd probably want to have one more chance at the brass ring because he's never won a title as an NBA head coach. Philadelphia would be the team that on paper would seem to be closest to being able to contend, but you've got a lot of wild cards in the East with Kevin Durant coming back to Brooklyn, and I don't know if Philadelphia is going to be better or worse next season, and they maybe have the mindset to try to make some major changes there with our old buddy Elton Brand as the general manager. I don't think there's a perfect situation. I think that the New Orleans thing is more of a long-term project, and as we mentioned, with Mike D'Antoni, right around 70 years old, I don't know if he's in the mood for a 3 to 5 year project. Obviously, they've got great talent there, but I don't think they're going to contend in the next year or two.
Mike D'Antoni has had a very successful coaching career. But here's a fact that you just can't look past. He's got the 3rd most wins in NBA history, but has never won a title. To be honest with you, has he ever been to the championship round? I don't think he's been that either.
I don't think so. Sounds a lot like Don Nelson, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And Don Nelson is number 1 on that list, by the way. All right, other names, we talked about Billy Donovan. Where does he end up going? I hear Chauncey Billups, his name is coming up with a lot of people. Kenny Atkinson. We're going to talk about the Bulls because I don't think any of these names are going to end up being a Bulls head coach. We'll talk about them after we talk to Joe. But there's going to be a lot of shifting around of veteran coaches going from one franchise to the other in the offseason.
Yeah, and of course, when the music stops, there'll be guys that won't have a seat. And
That's right.
Jason Kidd has been pushing his name out there, trying to get involved in
Tyrone
Philadelphia
Lue.
and Houston. We even heard that the Rockets might talk to Jeff Van Gundy, who coached the Rockets back in the Yao Ming, Tracy McGrady days. So, there's all kinds of big-name guys that are going to be out there that may be available for interviews with different teams, but I don't think the Bulls are going to get involved with any of those guys. I think that the one former head coach that may fit in the search is Kenny Atkinson, because he comes from a similar situation in Brooklyn where he took a team from the 20-win team all the way to the playoffs, and obviously his strength was in player development. So he may be a guy that gets an interview. He probably already has. There was a report on Tuesday from ESPN's Adrian Wojnarowski that the Bulls may narrow their search down to 3 finalists by the end of the week and maybe bring some people in for in-person interviews. So with the NBA allowing the bottom 8 teams to have these mini camps coming up, maybe they will try to get a coach in before that's over.
All right, let's take a break here right now. When we come back, we're going to talk to the one and only Joe Cowley's always got interesting things to say. I can't wait to hear what he has in store for us today. We'll be back right after this.
Hey everyone, Ryan Badgley from the Barfly Tailgate Show, and football season is kicking off, and I know you feel like I do, so to steal a phrase from WWE superstar Daniel Bryan, yes, yes, yes! And I also know you are like me and you love the work Allen Robinson is putting out on the football field, but also off the field. That's why we're so pleased to partner with the Allen Robinson Within Reach Foundation. Their work provides educational opportunities and resources to low-income and inner-city Chicago students to help put success within reach. How can you help? Immediately you can visit allenrobinson12.org and learn more about what they are doing and make a donation. If you can't donate money, can you donate your time? The foundation is always looking for volunteers. And please let others know about their great work. In the coming weeks, the Barroom Network will hold some fundraising efforts, and we hope that you'll be a part of those. And again, let your family and friends know. Now, how about them Chicago Bears? I'm so psyched up for this season. I think A-Rob has 100 catches and double-digit touchdowns. Now let's bear down.
And welcome back to the podcast. I'm David Schuster. He, of course, is Mark Schanowski. And Mark, we are now joined by, honestly, one of the best reporters I've ever been fortunate to be around. We're talking about Joe Cowley, and you can follow him on Twitter at JCowleyHoops. And I've been with Joe both with the White Sox and with the Bulls. And Joe's just got this way. He gets stuff out of athletes and other people in sports, and he just does it with his journalistic practices, and he's really, really good at what he does.
And we're really lucky to have him in this format because everybody out there has an opinion about Joe Cowley. Nobody's neutral about Joe, and Joe doesn't care, right, Joe?
No, what do I care? I get a paycheck every 2 weeks. I don't care at this point. I got enough problems.
Well, we've always loved.
Guys off here. I got 2 kids I'm trying to homeschool Chinese to. I mean, come on. I got enough problems on my plate. Don't worry about other people.
That's a lot tougher than covering sports. There's no question about that. But in the meantime, the Bulls are getting back to some semblance of activity with the individual workouts and then some team activity the next couple of weeks. And Arturas behind the scenes was one of the guys really pushing for this. Obviously, it would have been unfair for them to go 8-9 months without any kind of competition. What are they going to get out of this next couple of weeks, do you think, Joe?
I think he's going to get to see who's a competitor and who's not. I mean, you could question the staff and you could go through film, but to lay eyes on him, he's a guy that likes to lay eyes on what he is scouting and what he sees instead of just watching tape or talking to guys in Zoom calls or watching them shoot around with a coach that's wearing a mask and do one-on-one drills. He just wants to see these guys compete and what they're about, see if what he was told about certain guys is true in his eyes or if it's just someone else's opinion that he doesn't buy into anymore. So, it's an important time for, like a team like Golden State, they didn't need the bubble, but a team like the Bulls, the Knicks, Atlanta, the time that they didn't get in that bubble is massive. And, I understand that you are going to get, 10 days or 2 weeks of working out, these voluntary workouts, but it won't be anything near as far as making up for not only a competitive standpoint, but everything that was lost as far as players that didn't know each other, getting to know each other, and the recruitment process that's going to go on, and especially in the off season of 21 when we have the greatest free agent class of all time potentially sitting out there. So, it's not going to make up for anything, but it's better than nothing because to have these guys stagnant for as long as they were going to be stagnant without nothing would be just a developmental nightmare. So I think it's big. It's going to be interesting if there's a coach in place, too, at the time to kind of watch it. I don't know if there is. It sounds like they're almost wrapping up round 1 of the interview process and obviously starting round 2. But I don't know if they could swing this all in time to get someone in the building to start saying, hey, this is what I want to do offensively, defensively. This is what I like about you. This is what you need to work on. So it's kind of operating a ghost ship still.
We're recording this episode with Joe on Tuesday afternoon, and Tuesday night is going to be Game 7 between the Nuggets and Clippers, and the Nuggets trying to accomplish something that never has been done, a team trying to rally from a 3-1 deficit in 2 separate rounds of a playoff season. What does that tell Bulls fans about the team that Arturas helped build and the kind of player that he likes as we try to project what this roster could look like in a year or two?
Yeah, I mean, that Denver team, we're getting a chance to see it. And look, I don't know if Denver would match up with the Lakers like they are the Clippers, just like I don't know if the Lakers match up well against the Clippers like some of the other teams that have given the Clippers problems. So, what's that saying about the prize fights? It's kind of about the matchup. And but yeah, the Nuggets have been, we've kind of seen this team emerging and these young players emerging for a couple of years. But what Murray has done is a jump that I don't think anyone saw coming because it kind of, yes, there were glimpses of it, but to see him emerge as a star in the bubble, and I've talked to some guys, there are some actual thoughts behind why some players that you didn't see doing this kind of emerged. First of all, there was no home and away, and lots of times fringe players, if they're on their way to stardom, if you look at their numbers, they're different from home and away when you're playing in a neutral site. And then one thing people haven't talked about, I've talked to a couple guys that were playing in the bubble, the shooting has been so much easier because of the background. You're not seeing fans. It's a dark. It's like the perfect shooting atmosphere for everybody. So I think people have to put that kind of stuff in context, but that doesn't take away from what Murray's done. We all knew what Joker was, and Jokic just kind of been doing this for a couple of years. But yeah, I think Bulls fans can at least feel good that, hey, we're getting a guy here who is an architect and is coming from a building that was built that is sturdy and that is impressive and that looks like it will be like that for a couple more years. So, if you could duplicate that, put the blueprints in place here, they may have something good in the Eastern Conference. So, to me, that's the most exciting part Bulls fans can kind of embrace is, he gets it. He understands a mix of whether it's Euros or just scouting college guys. And he didn't do it alone by any means, obviously, but he comes from a place that you can kind of embrace, like a Miami or a Denver, a place that is building a culture and has a culture, and you're seeing it kind of, emerge as a powerhouse. So to me, that's what Bulls fans could be the most excited about is can he duplicate that blueprint now?
Hey, Joe, back to the coaching search for the Bulls. And there are some names that are at least out there that have experience as head coaches, D'Antoni and Billy Donovan and Kenny Atkinson, but I'm of the belief that's not what Arturas Karnisovas is going to do. He's going to find one of these assistant coaches that, all the names that we've been reading about, and he's going to tie his hitch to one of those guys ultimately and grow together, and it's almost like he's going to find that diamond in the rough and make him the next big head coach in the NBA. Do you agree or disagree with that?
I agree with that to a certain extent. I think he's going to be, from what and I don't know him that well. It's very on the surface and very much just in conversation what my experience with him. I think he doesn't really care about what the resume says as much as how you impress him in the interview process. Now, the resume obviously will be looked at, but I think it's more about, okay, I don't really care what you did here. We want the best guy for this position that we feel we can talk to, that we can work with, that gets what we want to build, that understands the fabric of Bulls basketball and how important we see it moving forward. So, I don't know if the resume is going to impress him. So that's why I think, it can easily be an assistant over another guy. There are some, I know there's a lot of the Atkinson love. I don't get it. I just think there's too many red flags with that dude, and I've talked to a couple of current and former coaches over the last month to 6 weeks, and he has a growing reputation as kind of an operator. And didn't we just get rid of a guy who was kind of an operator?
Yes.
So, yeah, I don't know if that's the right fit. This idea that he turns, water into wine, I know it's bigger than the winning percentage, but okay, his star pupil is Deangelo Russell. Well, that was a number 2 pick in a draft, and that is a guy that's gotten better each year, whether it was Atkinson or not. And that's a guy that after Atkinson was fired or after he left said, really, Atkinson wasn't really playing me, didn't know what I was until there were injuries, and then he had to play. This idea that he's this developer and this, he's done some good things with some guys, but hell, you could say Jim did some things with Zach. I mean, does that make Jim a developer? I don't think so. I don't think, you could say Kobe White developed under Jim. I don't think that was the case. I think it was the talent just kind of saying, okay, let me be free to do what I want, and the talent kind of emerging and doing what it should do. So I don't know if that's development. So the Atkinson thing, I don't get, and I hope that's not the choice. But there are some names in the Duke. Obviously Sun-times, and I've been writing this for a long time, that he was up there as far as a possibility, and there were scouts talking about this for months, even back before they went into the bubble, that the Bulls were really enamored by him and what he brings to the table. So in my mind, he's still atop that list. The Billy Donovan thing is interesting, but there hasn't really been a tie or anything reported that there's been dialogue between the two. So, until I hear that or see that, I won't get too excited about Billy Donovan. But I think it's going to be an assistant just from the feel of it, but I hope it's just not Atkinson. To me, that's just too easy, and it's not the right guy for this move and this locker room.
Joe, you mentioned earlier that Arturas uses the phrase he likes to lay his eyes on players, and it's kind of created this thought in the media and a lot of the fan base that this next season is just going to be a kind of evaluating year where you basically add the draft pick, bring back the same group, and see what you got, maybe make some moves at the trade deadline. My thought is when you have a team that is underachieved, and Arturas was pretty out front in saying this group has not met their level of their talent in terms of their wins and losses, I think this is a unique opportunity this offseason. Take the 4 pick, take Wendell Carter or Lauri Markkanen, package them up, and get somebody who can really help you this year. I mean, I know there's some value in trying to get a personal evaluation of what you got, but I think with the unique set of circumstances, with some teams hemorrhaging cash, there might be some really unique opportunities in the trade market this offseason.
I couldn't agree with you more. There are, I think, last I saw, there's only 3 teams that are cap-friendly going into this offseason, okay? So you're telling me this is just the finances, okay? You can guess what the cap's going to be next year, but what the big thing is, what's that cap going to be in the 21 offseason? You're going to have COVID crushing the cap. You're going to have the China money crushing the cap. And you're going to have, arguably, like we talked about, the most expensive free agent class not having enough money to divide up. And the NBA knows that's coming. So if you're the Bulls, you are sitting so pretty with some assets that you can at least show an organization, look, Lauri Markkanen was high on everyone's list a year and a half ago. There's always somebody that thinks they can improve something. So I am all for packaging whatever it takes, because I'm not sold on anybody on this roster. From Zach all the way down, there is no one that I say is untouchable or that should buy instead of rent in Chicago. So I would definitely look to make a move, add a star, and then when Otto and all those other, Big Chris, when all those Felicio, when all those contracts come off the books, you may be one of the few teams that's sitting at the table. You got 1 star, you got room for another star, and you still have a couple young assets around you that can help build this thing. To me, that's good enough in the East to get this foundation going and to at least say, hey, there's no reason why we're not an 8 through 6 going into the 21 season as far as a playoff team, and then who knows what happens after that. So I agree with you 100% just based on the economic landscape throughout the NBA. the Bulls are really in a situation where they can strike and kind of flip this roster over quickly and still be sitting pretty when there's not enough money to pay all these guys in 21, and they're able to get one, possibly two, if it's a discount, and instantly turn this whole roster around and the direction of this team. So I couldn't agree with you more, Mark.
Hey, Joe, from your mouth to Arturas's ears, I hope that something like that happens. I actually like the direction you just painted there. There's also a lot of rumors with the draft, which, by the way, is being pushed back to sometime in November. I don't think they have an exact date just yet. But there's some crazy rumors already going around, as you well know, and that's usually a dime a dozen. But one of them has the Knicks moving up to number 2 and taking LaMelo Ball, and I just can't see him and Thibs working together. And then if he doesn't go at number 2, Ball falls to number 3, and that means that his daddy, LeVar Ball, and Michael Jordan can finally have that one-on-one that they've been talking about for years. And I think, oh my God, I would pay if LaMelo Ball ends up in Charlotte and LeVar is there, on the sidelines with Michael sitting across court from him. What kind of rumors are you hearing around the league?
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, it's the worst time to be a top 3, top 4 team in this draft. This has kind of got the Michael Bennett draft all over it, where you could have number 1, be excited about it, get it, and the guy busts out. Now, I think there's a little more talent than that, but I know Arturas thinks that this draft has some good players in it, and it does. But the problem is you could hit on that player at 12, or you could hit that player at 16, and you could hit that player at 19, and then you got your fan base going, well, why the hell didn't we take the guy that fell down to 12? Because there's just so many things you can't really tell about these guys. Not only because they didn't get to compete in March Madness, that's small, but a lot of these guys have wounds and have scabs on them. And even the top 4 or 5 guys. Now, there's some nice things about those top 4 guys, but there's no safe pick. There's no, we for sure have to have this. So I think it'll be interesting. Whatever the NBA decides is going to be the draft process, whether it's some kind of camp, a virtual camp, whatever that is really going to test this new Bulls front office and Arturas specifically, because you're going to have to do your homework differently than you ever have and try and make the best guess that you can with as limited resources as ever been handed to a front office to do across the board. All the teams have to deal with that. So it will be interesting to see who they settle on, who they like. Don't discount his success with Euros and going that route. Don't discount moving down. I think everything is on the table for this. So, again, and that's why Mark's idea about, package that number 4 and package, asset Wendell or asset Lowry or both, if it means bringing something that is proven and star-like into this thing, I'm for it. I'd rather go that way than uncertainty. And I think once we find out what the NBA is going to hand these guys, the rumors will calm down a little bit because people actually have a better idea of, okay, we think we at least know what this guy is a little bit more than we did a month ago. So I'm going to hold judgment on all rumors until they actually can lay eyes on things a little bit better.
Yeah, I think this draft could be historically bad, so I'm all for trading out if that option is on the table. Hey, but before we let you go, I want to ask you about one of the guys you wrote a lot about in past years and covered for a long time, and that's Jimmy Butler. We've seen him grow as a team leader right in front of our eyes, and I think being a part of that Pat Riley culture has really played into his sweet spot. Jimmy was a guy that always prided himself on working harder than everybody else and demanded that of his teammates, and that rubbed a lot of people the wrong way in his various stops. But I remember back in the days when it was the Team Jimmy versus Team Derek, you were pretty solidly on the Team Jimmy side, and just before he was traded away, you wrote a very fascinating piece about the idea that maybe he could recruit Kyrie Irving to come join him in Chicago. Did the Bulls really drop the ball in trading Jimmy and especially seeing what he's become now in Miami with the chance to take that team to the finals?
Oh, 100%, but he wasn't going to flourish here because the culture in Chicago is much softer than it is down in Miami, and look, you can trace the path of what Jimmy was trying to do. People wanted to poo-poo the Kyrie story, but all of a sudden when Kyrie came out when he was in Cleveland and said, "Okay, I want to be traded from Cleveland. This is my list of teams," it was like Boston, the Lakers, and Minnesota. Who was in Minnesota? Oh, Jimmy Butler was. What player asked to be traded to Minnesota in
nobody.
the last 20 years? So, I mean, you can kind of trace the relationship that Jimmy and Kyrie had, and, I stand behind that reporting 100% because I know what Jimmy was trying to do, whether it was Kyrie in a trade or Kyle Lowry, a guy he became very close to in free agency, and then obviously Toronto offered Lowry what, no team could. So Jimmy was hell-bent on staying in Chicago and helping Gar and John build something, but making him the face of that recruiting, like many other teams have been. And they just didn't feel like they wanted to commit that money to Jimmy, but also hand the keys to the car over to Jimmy. They just don't give that kind of power to a player. So, yeah, it was a complete mistake. And what happened now is a quick story. So the first trip into Miami, after the game, I do all the interviews and I write up, and I know Jimmy's always kind of slow and stuff, so I knew I had time to send the story and then go down and BS with him. So I go down there and we're talking. There's like 4 guys waiting for him. Hero, all the young guys, all their young guys. I go, what's going on? Why are they waiting for you? Oh, man. He goes, Friday night, they all come to the crib. We watch movies. We talk basketball. And then we all, I make sure that they understand what this weekend is. Saturday early practice. When you get there, when you shoot early. You go, and I said, this is what you didn't get in Chicago, huh? Young dudes that wanted to work. He goes, exactly. He goes, we had a bunch of young guys that didn't understand hard work, that weren't pushed into being hard workers. And he goes, and this is early on. He's like, I'm telling you, this Hero dude, this dude is just a baller. He just talks ball all the time. He wants to work. He wants to do all this stuff. And that Bulls locker room didn't want to be a part of that. And the big problem is that starts at the top. That culture was reinforced that, hey, yeah, you don't have to work that hard. Don't listen to Jimmy because Jimmy just does his own thing. That came from the top down. Now you go to a place like Miami with Pat Riley and Bolster and guys like that. This is your leader, Jimmy. If Jimmy tells you, drop and give him 20 and eat sand while you're doing it, that's what you do. And so these guys, it's just unbelievable how much harder they are as people and as players and as competitors. And I think we've seen that in this playoffs because it isn't talent. When you look talent to talent, Miami shouldn't be sitting where they are. They have some talented young players, don't get me wrong. But, they should not be doing what they've done and doing it easily. And so that comes from one guy that the Bulls didn't trust, didn't believe in, and now they're paying for it. And their rebuild decision was catastrophic, not because they decided to rebuild, but they decided this is how we're going to do it by, waiting for Jimmy to go to Europe with Wahlberg and then kind of blow him up from behind and then, the rest is history. So, yeah, catastrophic decision by the organization in what they had in their own building. And the thing that really should hurt Bulls fans, he wanted to stay a Bull. Jimmy never wanted to leave Chicago. He loved Chicago. And so that's the thing that really stings. You had a guy that loved the essence of the city, loved the organization, wasn't afraid of that statue in the atrium, wasn't afraid of Derrick Rose and his history or Joakim, backed down from no one, and was pushed out and painted to be a bad guy. And so, I'll always, going back in that history, I'll always say there was not even a choice of what was right when it came to Team Jimmy or Team Derrick or however people in the media wanted to portray it. They picked the wrong guy and they picked the wrong decision for me to head and go in this direction of this rebuild.
Hey, Joe, we appreciate you joining us to talk hoops, but I can't let you go without talking a little football real quickly because everybody knows Joe's a huge Steelers fan, and they look pretty
decent. Oh, it was a good night.
They look pretty decent.
The big bearded one back there.
Big Ben looked pretty damn good last night.
Except when he tried to run. He looked like he was 100 years old.
I know he's older and stuff, but that was like a man dragging the piano on his back. Yeah, no, it was good to see. I mean, just being a Steelers fan, I mean, you guys know there's doing this as long as you guys have it, your fandom gets tainted. You very rarely are a fan of a team after a long time, even if you grew up watching them. But the one thing that I always pride myself is I was able to stay away from being an NFL writer, except for those 2 months I had to fill in and So the one purity I have is watching Steeler football and still being able to be a fan for that. We know the window's closing. We know there's very little time left. It's 1 or 2 more years to try getting, that 7th one. And so it was exciting to see at least night 1, not only football back, because I think we all need that, but secondly, for a Steeler fan, see Big Ben back and see him performing. And I couldn't stand Duck Hodges anymore. If I had to watch one more Duck Hodges game, I don't know what I would do.
Well, I think I speak for all of us. And the 4 months when pro sports was shut down was the longest 4 months of my life. So I'm glad the games are up and running again. And we're so lucky to have Joe Cowley covering the Bulls. We'll be following your coverage at the Sun-Times, and J. Cowley Hoops is the Twitter handle, so make sure you follow Joe. He's always out front with everything and not afraid to state his opinion. So, Joe, good luck with the homeschooling, and we look forward to seeing you down the road.
All right, anytime, guys. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Joe.
And I said, who can I get to break down the White Sox and a very good performance of late and talk about where this club may be headed? Then my next guest, he's a Hall of Famer. He's been with us before. It's my buddy, my friend, Hawk Harrelson. How are you, Hawk?
All right, big guy. What are we going to argue about today?
Nothing. We don't have nothing to argue about today.
It's the Mike North Advantage, only on the Barroom Network.
And welcome back to the podcast. I'm David Schuster. He's Mark Schanowski. And as mentioned, Joe Cowley did not disappoint, did he?
No, he never does. Some very strong comments about the Bulls' decision to trade away Jimmy Butler. And I know that, as every reporter, there are certain athletes that we develop some kind of a relationship with where they will give you some information that maybe they won't give to the media at large. And Joe obviously had a good connection with Jimmy, and Jimmy had a lot of trust in Joe. So, he let him in on the whole idea of trying to rebuild around Jimmy. Because remember back in those days, Jimmy was part of the national team. I believe it was the World Championships. And Kyrie was on that team, and Kevin Durant and some others. And Jimmy's very gregarious, very outgoing. We saw the clips of them singing on the plane and all that stuff. And I'm sure Jimmy built some friendships that he thought Chicago's a major market, not far removed from being a legitimate contender. If I can bring in one of those guys, maybe they bring in another veteran in a trade, we can contend in the East. And I'm sure, how self-confident Jimmy is. Jimmy believed that he could put together a winning roster. Obviously, the Bulls front office at that time felt differently, and then they made the move to rebuild. And, when you look back on it, you can see both sides of it. Jimmy had become kind of difficult in the locker room. The Bulls got a pretty good return, in Zach LaVine, Lauri Markkanen, and Chris Dunn. And the Bulls were really high on Chris Dunn when they made that trade, who was turned out to be, of the least valuable of the three, at least in Chicago. So you can understand it from both sides. But now when you see what Jimmy's doing in Miami, 3 organizations later, you wonder, did they make a mistake? But, as we always say, hindsight's always 20/20 in sports.
Yeah, they say buyers regret. In this instance, maybe traders regret on the Bulls' part. But I just don't think they ever wanted to cough up that kind of money. They were looking at $40 million a year times how many? 5 at that juncture for Jimmy. And I just don't think they wanted committed that money. And I don't think they trusted him to be what he's turning out to now be in Miami. And let's face it, it didn't work out for him in Philadelphia. It didn't work out for him in Minnesota, but he's definitely found a home. And I think every time he looks at Pat Riley, he goes, this is the right place for me.
Well, the story that Joe told about him having the young players over to his house and talking basketball and making sure that they minded their P's and Q's, it does suggest that that's kind of what he was looking for in Chicago, kind of what he's looking for in Minnesota, and didn't find it. I think the problems in Philadelphia were more a disconnect with the head coach, Brett Brown, where he didn't like the way he was being used in the offense. But, Jimmy's headstrong, and he's always going to believe that he sees it the right way. I always chuckle when the sideline reporters in these softball fluff interviews ask him, do you think you're the best player in the NBA, or do you think you're better than so-and-so? And Jimmy always says, yes, I do. He's never going to back down from a challenge.
And he believes it.
Remember the days back when, when Paul George was emerging in Indiana, and they had some great head-to-head battles, both at the United Center and in Indianapolis. That became a really good rivalry, and Jimmy was indignant when anyone would suggest that Paul George was better than he was.
The thing, we talk about Joe and Jimmy. the reason I think they both got along because they have the same personality. They both have bulldog kind of personality, so they were kindred with each other. And I saw that relationship develop right in front of my eyes, and it will go forward even if Jimmy, wherever Jimmy is, but he's down now. He's a staple down in Miami now. But we're still lucky to have Joe Cowley here covering the Bulls in Chicago for the Sun-Times, and we were definitely lucky to have him here today.
Yeah, we really enjoyed his visit. We appreciate it.
All right, so Mark, there was some more trade rumors, and we talked about Joe in regarding the draft and everything. And there's this website, and I can't even remember the name of the website. But
that tells you how good the rumor is.
But it was.
You really want to go forward with that?
Yeah, I do actually, because I love when I get your opinions on some of these that are wacky trade rumors. But it's that time of the year, which is great in the NBA, and we're about a month or so away, or is it 2 months away? 2 months away. I take it back.
You're right. I think the draft is tentatively scheduled for November 18th.
Okay, so 2 months away from basically as we speak right now. Anyway, there's this one website that is just intent on trading with the Brooklyn Nets. It's at least a possibility. So I'm going to throw these 3 trade rumors that this...
3 of them.
3 of them. Just like we did this last time.
Is
and
Kevin Durant the GM now?
No, and unfortunately he's not involved in any of these trade rumors either.
Yeah, if we get Kevin Durant, I'm all for it.
All right, let's start with the first one. They have Zach LaVine and Cristiano Felicio.
Oh, boy.
So already,
now
you're a little excited by that because everybody wants to get rid of him. Nice, happy-go-lucky guy, just $32 million over 4 years. Jesus,
love to have his bank account.
What were you thinking there? Anyway, Zach LaVine and Cristiano Felicio going to the Nets for Karis LeVert, who certainly has improved his stock around the NBA, no question about that. Jarrett Allen, the Nets' first-round pick, which is number 19, and those famous 2 second-round picks.
Oh, my gosh. The Bulls get the second-round picks? That never happens in a trade.
Well, but then they'll just trade them away somewhere else.
Yeah, I mean, that's just rearranging furniture on the Titanic. It's just, I mean, is Karis LeVert an upgrade over Zach LaVine? I mean, he was very good in the playoffs and throughout the bubble process, but to me, they're similar players. I think Zach is more explosive. I think he's probably the better player, and that's why the draft considerations come to Chicago, but I'll pass on that.
Okay, that would mean that the Bulls would have 2 first-round picks in this instance.
In a horrible draft.
Yeah, I'm going to pass on that one, too. I got a feeling we'll both pass on all of these. Here's the second one that they're intent on making with the Brooklyn Nets. It would be Zach going to the Nets for LeVert, Joe Harris, and two future first-round picks. You got to remember, 2 future first-round picks for the Nets are not going to be very good over the next few years because they should be a title contender with as long as Durant is healthy and Kyrie Irving there as well.
Well, this shows you how bad that rumor is. Joe Harris is a free agent, so you can't trade him unless it's a sign and trade. So,
well, then I'm almost embarrassed to give you the third one then, but I will. All right, here's the third one, and this is a complicated 3-way trade.
Yeah, that means it won't work.
It won't work as soon as I tell you the
names.
All
these people on the trade machine, they get the green light and they're like, oh, here we go.
All right, I guess this website is just beholding to the Brooklyn Nets because they want to have Zach LaVine go to the Nets. So Zach LaVine does go to the Nets. Yeah, the third star, which makes some sense, by the way, from the Nets standpoint. Anyway, Lauri Markkanen is also involved in this trade. Okay. He goes to New Orleans along with Thaddeus Young. And what do the Bulls get? The Bulls get Drew Holiday. They get Jarrett Allen, and Brooklyn's number 1. You're not giving up Zach LaVine and Lauri Markkanen for just Drew Holiday and basically the Nets number 1 at 19. That's an idiotic possibility.
Yeah, I mean, it all goes back to the comments from Kyrie Irving that he wasn't sure about the rest of the roster and maybe they needed to explore getting another star to join him and KD. But KD was on a podcast recently where he said that Karis LeVert can be that guy. Okay. That he said that his play in the bubble showed that he could emerge as that third guy to go along with Kyrie and himself. And I don't think that, he would be of the mind that they have to make a move with Karis LeVert to bring in a guy who's more established because when you talk about Zach, yeah, he's had a couple more years in the league, but he hasn't made an all-star team either, and I don't know that would be the guy that they would necessarily be targeting. If they're going to make a move, they're going to go after the Bradley Beals of the world, guys who have been all-stars, who have probably a more impressive resume than what Zach has to this point. I think that they'll probably take a look at what they have, and if they're going to make some changes, maybe they do it at midseason.
I think whatever happens in Brooklyn, Kevin Durant is basically the general manager of that team, along with Kyrie Irving. I think those two decided that Steve Nash was going to be the head coach, and whatever kind of trades or moves that are going forward, I don't even know who the general manager is in Brooklyn, to be honest with you.
Sean Marks.
Okay, well, I think he's second in command to those two players.
And the thing is, any team that hitches its wagon to Kyrie Irving, be careful.
Look out.
Because, he basically scorched earth on the way out of Cleveland, on the way out of Boston, and it just seems like he just has a very odd worldview. We know about the whole flat earth stuff and all the rest of it, but he just, he is very Kyrie-centric, and he feels like the world revolves around him, even if it is flat. And, he's just a tough teammate. And I think that, we talked about Jimmy. I think Kyrie's even worse in terms of he has this inflated perception of who he is as a player. Yes, he's very talented, very creative with the ball. He can score at will, but he doesn't always want to play in a team concept. We saw that in Boston last year. Remember, they played Milwaukee in the conference semifinals. They won the first game, and then Kyrie was just horrible, and they got drummed out in the next four. Kyrie
did not get along with LeBron in Cleveland, obviously. It's really hard not to get along with LeBron, both on and off the court. Kyrie Irving definitely has that mark against him. All right, let's get back to the Bulls for a second. We talked to Joe about potential head coaches. I'm still of the belief, and I'm going to hold steadfast on this, and we might find out rather quickly, because apparently they're going to be down to interviewing the last three on their list in the second or third round here, and we might have a Bulls head coach by the next time we do a podcast. What are your updated thoughts on all that?
Yeah, I think everything points in the direction of one of the assistants that's being talked about a lot, Wes Unseld Jr., who was Mike Malone's top assistant in Denver. Of course, the Nuggets could find themselves in the Western Conference Finals if they could win Game 7 against the Clippers. He was given a lot of credit for helping develop their defense, which isn't very good, but I think that's more personnel-related than scheme. We've heard the name Ime Udoka in Philadelphia, where he had worked under Mark Eversley, who was the general manager there before he came over to Chicago. And, there's a lot of other assistants I'm sure they've talked to throughout this process. I'm sure that a couple of them have kind of piqued their curiosity in terms of what they could be as a head coach. So now it's just a process of sitting down and evaluating who the best guys are, and hopefully doing some face-to-face meetings where they can really get a feel for the guy and get make a decision on whether or not that's the right player to lead this program going forward.
All right, the Bulls are going to have some kind of training camp up, very shortly here over at the Advocate Center. I don't know if the media is going to be allowed in there or not. I doubt it also. It's going to be a minimum mark of 9 months for the Bulls in between real games. At least 9 months. We don't know when the regular season next season will start anyway, but even if it starts, let's just say the first of the year, that's 9 months. If it starts, around Martin Luther King Day, that's closer to a full year. I crave having NBA basketball right in front of me. I mean, it's been great watching it in the bubble, don't get me wrong, and I've enjoyed every minute of it so far, but I want to be courtside again for a game.
Yeah, and that's the whole mission for the NBA, is when can they get back to the point where media and fans can be there and really have the whole experience, the NBA experience. I don't think they want to try to rush it to try to get it to Christmas Day and still not have the ability to bring fans into the arena. So I think it's just going to be a wait-and-see process. This offseason is going to be interesting because with the draft being pushed back, one of the things that Joe mentioned and has been put out there in public is that there is going to be some type of draft combine, whether it's virtual or in person. So these NBA executives will get a chance to get another look at these prospects who they haven't seen since late in the college season. I think that's going to be valuable. I don't know if they're going to be able to do in-person interviews. They certainly won't be able to bring them to their team facilities, but they'll get a chance at least to see these guys one more time before the draft hits on the 18th.
And Mark, we talked about Mike D'Antoni having a very successful head coaching career but never winning a championship, a player who's had a very, very good NBA career. He won a title in college at Syracuse, and we're talking about Carmelo Anthony. He's had a very good NBA career, but he's never won anything either. And about a week or two ago, whatever it was, when Portland was eliminated, he said, I think I found a home, and I really love it here. But I'm reading more and more that he might want to end up back with Tom Thibodeau in New York. I mean, he's been in New York once already. He almost came to the Bulls supposedly because of Tom Thibodeau, and that, fell apart for whatever reasons at the end. Can you you see him going back to New York and ending his career there, or do you buy into this stuff that he thinks he found a home out in Portland?
I think he's better off staying in Portland. He's got a much better chance to be on a competitive squad with Lillard and McCollum, and they may be looking to make changes too. We've heard C.J. McCollum's name in a bunch of trade rumors. We talked about his name last week with the crazy rumors section of the podcast.
It was that same website, by the way.
Whatever it's called. But I think he fits there because they just want him to do what he does best, which is score. He can just spot up and shoot, or he can isolate in certain sets that they run. I think he's a good fit over there. He comes to New York with a mishmash of a roster and a lot of young guys trying to prove themselves. I think that he would just be setting himself for disappointment because he had so many great years playing at Madison Square Garden where he's one of the elite scorers in the league. To come back, at 75% or maybe even less of what he used to be, I don't think the New York fan base, they'd welcome him back at first, but eventually they'd turn on him.
Do you think Taj Gibson is happy that Tom Thibodeau is his head coach again? Or is there pros and cons to this one?
Yeah, I thought Taj was coming back to the Bulls because the Bulls were looking for a veteran leader.
Instead of Thaddeus Young, I almost wish that he would have.
I thought that, given the fact that he had a great relationship with the front office, I was really expecting that one of the first announcements when signings could be announced that Taj Gibson was coming back to the Bulls. And then, as you mentioned, they decided to go with Thaddeus Young. I think maybe thinking that he was a better offensive player, which on paper he is, but Thad Young didn't have a great year, although he did play better in the second half of the season when he was getting more minutes. But, Taj is a great guy. Playing for Tom Thibodeau can be difficult, and Taj was pretty open about saying that it could be tough.
Yeah. All right, well, this has been fun as always. We do appreciate Joe Cowley joining us today. Mark, I always appreciate sitting next to you talking basketball, and I'll look forward to doing it again soon.
Yeah, we'll have to see who we're going to get through the conference finals, and whatever it's going to be a unique matchup in the NBA finals in the bubble. It'd
Absolutely.
be strange, yeah. And they said no alcohol for the celebration, so that's one negative.
Well, they didn't say that for the media outside the bubble, and we will be very shortly, especially after I listen back to this podcast. No, I'm just kidding. All right, folks, you take care, and we'll talk to you soon.
So long.
Hey, are you getting automatic downloads of Sharpshooters and all our other Barroom Network shows? If not, just go to Google and type in Bears Barroom Radio Network and you'll see delivery stations like iTunes, Podbean, Spotify. Choose any one of those delivery stations, subscribe, and you'll get automatic downloads of Sharpshooters and all of your favorite Barroom shows.